This video is going to be a little bit different than you normally expect from me, but I'm lonely. And in this video, I just want to share my own thoughts about my state of loneliness. To understand my situation, I think it's a good idea to first go back in time. And I think the moment when I experienced my first setbacks, I think I was around 5, 6, 7. I am born in a small town somewhere in the middle of the Netherlands. And I have lived there together with my father, with my mother, with my brother, with my sister. And we also had a dog. But on a young age, my father was an alcoholic. He was drinking during the weeks in the evenings when we were at home after school. So after he went to work, the first thing he did was to get a beer and get drunk in the evening. And when I was young, I didn't really thought about it. But when I'm looking back now, I think one of the things why I'm feeling lonely right now is also because I didn't really have a father figure. Because, you know, my father was an alcoholic and he was like walking away from his responsibilities, maybe also from his emotions and stuff like that. If you think about it, my father was an alcoholic, so my mother had to care of myself, my brother, and also my sister together, you know. So one moment when I think I was around the end of 6 or something, I was just sitting at school and I think the director of the school came to me and I was sitting there together with, I think it was my mother though, and also another person out there. And they were saying that my parents couldn't really care of us because my father wasn't there and my mother couldn't do it alone. So they said to me like, Ronald, you have to live at another place. You cannot really live with your parents anymore. So there is where my situation of living in a foster home started. And to give you a short summary, I've lived 7 years in several foster homes in my childhood from the age around 7 to 14. And I think when I was that age and I was living at the first foster home, I wasn't really aware of it. For me, it was weird that I have to leave my parents' place to have different father and a mother and then leave all my friends behind. The first 6 months I was living in the same town as I'm from, at the family which my mother also knew. And after 6 months it didn't really went well with me. So I had to move out and going to another foster home. And that was a foster home much further from where my parents from. I think it was 1.5 hours with the car or something. And for the Netherlands, that's far away, you know. And I was living there at a very Christian family. I didn't believe myself, you know. My parents didn't believe in anything. They were very strict. So I still remember the first day when I was there. And it was so weird because I was there with other foster children as well, who also lived in that family. I think around 7 or something. But the first moment what I remember was that they say like, Ronald, use your hands. We have to pray for dinner. And I didn't even knew what that was, you know. So I think on a young age, I already had like a lot of questions which I didn't process for myself because I was too young to understand. I don't want to say anything about Christianity, but it's more about the situation which I was in, just away from your parents and start a new life without knowing anyone. So the result of moving out to another place gave me separation anxiety. So you have to see it like this. I was just moving out to another place, to another school, and the other children already knew each other for 4 years. But because I had that separation anxiety, it was hard for me to make real friends, you know, because I was scared that I had to move out again. So why should I make new friends? So yeah, my younger years were very hard. Also when I was thinking about it back. But when I was living at the foster home, I only saw my parents once in a month for an hour. That was the only moment I could see my parents. And on the moment when the time was over, I still remember this moment. I saw my mother crying because she still wanted to see me, you know. But after 2.5 years living at that very strict Christian foster home, I got the possibility to live at another foster home close to my parents. And it was close to my parents because my foster mom was my aunt. And I could live at her place because she built the opportunity that I could live closer to my parents, you know. And on that moment, my father wasn't an alcoholic anymore, but my parents still had mental issues and problems, which I don't blame them, you know. So I could live at my aunt's place. And I think I was around 11 or something when I was living there, and I have lived there the rest of my years living in a foster home. And on that moment, I also started to become older. I became wiser. I also understood more about the situation where I was in, you know, because I knew it wasn't a normal situation what I saw with people around me. So one of the things I also had in that moment was that because I didn't really understand myself, I got anger issues. It was like out of nowhere, like an explosion of anger, because I didn't really understand myself. I didn't understand the situation where I was in. Also the situation with my parents. So I think that had like a big impact on my life. The whole situation without a father, without many friends, a lot of confusion about my life. But all those years of anger and stuff like that, I also got on one moment like limited beliefs and limited thoughts to my head, you know. I was like fucking myself so much up every time, like I'm a loser, I'm not worth it, it's my parents' fault, I have a shit life, I hate myself. And these were things I had for a long period in my life. And in combination when I was older, using alcohol, using drugs, seeing girls, you know, and I was using that as escapism. So I was escaping from the person I was because I hated myself. And in one moment all those thoughts it was just too much. And on one moment, I still remember the moment, I was sitting there with my mother because I was seeing her also sometimes, and also with my neighbor as well. She was good friends with my mother. And it was just, my head was making over hours. And I was screaming, crying, everything, throwing with stuff, you know. And it was maybe because on that moment I had a depression. And if I'm thinking back about it, it was. Because later the years, this is already a part when I was living back at my parents' place. So I was around 14 when I was living back, and that was also the period when I started to drinking alcohol. But then I was going into the party scene, you know, and going out, and I had a friend group, so that was nice. But I never really processed my emotions on that moment. But because I didn't do anything, or I wasn't aware about my emotions and about my thoughts and how I felt, was that I was really running away from the person I was. And I already had depressive thoughts on that moment, but in one moment those negative, limited thoughts became suicidal thoughts. I think I never spoke about this here on my channel though, really about this, you know? Yeah, I was just imagining myself jumping from in front of the train, you know? Because I never really understand myself. I hated my life. I didn't have like, you know, like those big icons as my parents, which they were not. I don't have them, you know. So my parents were also saying like, oh yeah, it's gonna be alright with you. But never really solving the problem because they didn't solve their own problem, you know. So you can say that I was like at a very low place in my life, a very low place. And on that moment I also seek help from a therapist, you know, or from a psychologist, I don't know anymore. But to understand myself more. So finally also the person who's like, you know, responsible for the foster care in the Netherlands, one of those persons who worked there, they had like a paper, 2 sides, with everything what happened, how they saw my parents, how they saw us, that we couldn't live at house, you know. And it was the first time when I've read that paper, and that was so confronting because they also wrote down that my parents had like both like a very low IQ like mental shortcomings, and they were also talking about me, about my rage and about my way of behavior. And I also had a therapist who helped me with with the negative beliefs I had at that moment. It really helped me to gain control back in my life. And one of the things I also did for that was moving out of house. So when I was 18, I started for the first time with my bachelor in another city here in the east of the Netherlands, around 100 kilometers from my house, from my parents' house. And one moment I was so done with all those negative thoughts. I was so done with pitying myself and, like having that mask that I have a shit life and that I'm not worth it and stuff like that. Like the very victim mentality, as the most people know. But all those years, like the first 4 years in my student house when I was living here, went really well. I was going consistent to the gym. I had a nice friend group. I was dating girls. It's also nice. I passed my bachelor after 4.5 years. I went abroad for 6 months, also met a lot of people there. And on that moment, I was also at my big friend group from the town I was from. But for me, I have changed as a person so much if you compare it to the person I was before. I think I was on the best mental place in my life. But to give you some backstory, because I have changed a lot as a person, I had to also make some sacrifices. And one of those sacrifices is the choice I've made recently. Because I was talking about that friend group, right? Those guys I know already for a long time. But when I was seeing them more and more, and every time, drinking, partying, I never felt so alone. I must say lonely. I never felt so lonely. And I was thinking, why do I feel lonely when I'm around with my friends, And then I came to the definition of emotional loneliness. And that is when you're like around with people in a social group, but you're not feeling emotionally connected with them. And when I saw that, I had to say it with my group, because the last time when I was with them, I was sitting there at the table and I was like, what do I do here? What I'm doing here. Even when they were my friends for 10 years, I have so many memories with them and I still appreciate them. But it also gave me so much stress. But then I was really journaling about this, writing it down, talking with friends about it. And I made the decision to leave the group. And after I did that, normally you will say I will get relief because I was in a stressful situation. But I felt so lonely when I did that. And that was maybe also because I was lonely. That was what I had created in my head, I still had some individual friends who I'm connecting more on an emotional level. But in that moment, I had the feeling that I had no friends. And I was like fucking myself up again, like I did when I was younger. I think that was one of my hardest decisions to do, leaving your friend group. But right now, I'm feeling relieved that I did it. But now it's a time to focus on myself, to become the friend with myself. I was still sometimes just empty, because on that moment I had the feeling that I didn't really connect with people on a deeper level, which is not true, by the way. But I had that feeling on that moment. So I experienced emotional loneliness. And I was thinking, why do I feel lonely? I'm making my videos, which is very motivating to also inspire you and also get the maximum out of you. And sometimes, I fuck up. And sometimes I've not always everything in control, But when I was journaling about the loneliness, I was also writing things down that I was thinking that end of my life alone is the worst thing that happened, or what is going to happen. But when I was looking back at this, I was thinking that I had to leave that friend group, because the worst thing in life is to be around people who make you feel alone, which I had in the situation. And I don't blame them. I had just another route. If you know about the Fast and Furious ending, going two sides, I had the feeling that I went the other side, But yeah, sometimes I feel lonely, but I'm thinking, is that real loneliness? And I'm getting more energy from one friend who is like further with me on an emotional level than that whole friend group. I don't blame them, but that was how I felt. And that choice to leave the friend group, it took me 3-4 months to finally make that choice, you know? Because I was emotionally so fucking myself up. Like, first I was ignoring it. Finally, it went more and more the feeling that I had to change something. So for now, advice for myself, I'm going to focus on me. I'm not going to focus on external validation, girls, friend groups. I'm still seeing my individual friends, you know, that's important. But I'm going to focus on myself. I have to become my own best friend. Because when I don't really love myself, how can I give love to others, you know? And if I still continue to focus on my passion, making videos, inspire others, I think the loneliness will get lower, you know? So I'm kind of done with being my own victim. Because I think one of the reasons, is trauma, where I felt more lonely, didn't really have a father figure, you know? But I really believe I felt lonely because I chose to be lonely. And that situation with my old friend group, I chose to be around with them and I felt more lonely. So if I'm cutting that away, that's less stress. But loneliness is also a mindset. You know, I was in my darkest period in my life. But I really believe that you can change it. And sometimes you need help from others with that. See, a psychologist or a therapist who can help you with talking about your emotions or the things which are going shit in your life, and maybe that can give you relief. Or maybe they can give you other insights about your life, you know? You are the one who are choosing the direction of your ship. It's you. It's not someone else. And even when you had like a very shit childhood like me, I think I will not be the person I am today. Setbacks are also learning moments, you know? Learning about how life is. And I'm really going to focus on the person who I want to be. I want to be a real man who get fully responsible for himself and who is also an inspirator for himself. That's the first focus. And hopefully also inspire others. And I just have to get my shit together. And that is also the affirmation I'm having every morning. I am a real man. I am love. I am a responsibility. I am lonely. That's the same. If you are lonely and you're saying to yourself that you're lonely, the more likely you focus only on the loneliness. And I'm not a psychologist, I'm just speaking from my own experience. But I think to focus on the things you really want to do, focus on the person who you want to be, on a mental and physical level, maybe also on a business level, earning money. I think finally people with the same aspirations, with the same values as you will come to your way, you know. Just believe in yourself. And to give you an advice, focus on the things you want to do, where you get energy from. And it doesn't have to be the same as everyone else is doing. Focus on becoming the best version of you. And that's also where I believe in. Everything starts with you. And sometimes we're having those shit moments in life, but that's also making the person who you are today. So this is just some thoughts and the situation I had currently in my life with loneliness. But now it's time to make the best version of you. Focus on becoming the best version of yourself and become friends with that person. So if you're feeling lonely, like what I had, if you're also having bad shit going on in your life, I'm there for you, man. If you want to speak about this, just put a comment down there, you know, under my video. I'm not using fast edits and stuff because I just want to share this message as pure as possible, you know. This was the video of today. Hopefully it still can inspire you, but on the other hand, it is also just something I had to get off my mind, you know, and just speak out to my friends. So that was the video, and take care, guys.